Oh, welcome back to TDWrites. I'm your host, Peter Vaughn, and we are here in episode 6. Man, it's good to see you. Or, not see you, but hear you. I'm not hearing you. You're hearing me. It's good to be heard. It's good to be out there, putting my words out into the ether, where anyone and everyone can hear it. Thank you so much for listening already. I'm just going to thank you right now. Before we even get underway, I would like to thank you for listening to the podcast. We've got a good episode, hopefully. I haven't recorded it yet. I'm in the process of recording this episode. And I think we should enjoy it. Hopefully I can get this up sometime soon. Yeah, let's just dive right into this week's stories. In this episode of the podcast, we'll be reading a short story called Diner Man, a poem called The Grim Rapper, and we'll be joined by a special guest reader for a letter called Mrs. Claus. Kane, get back to work, my boss yelled in my general direction. Screw off, I'm on my break, I yelled back, sliding into the booth in the back of the diner. I plopped my brown paper bag down in front of me and took out my slightly smelly tuna sandwich. I hate my life. Genuinely. I ate in silence. A couple sat at the counter and were quietly laughing to each other. My lip involuntarily curled. My girl left me 2 months ago. It still stung. The news told of another attack. That didn't sting as much. The bell rang as our front door opened. A tall man entered, and for one brief moment just stood in the doorway. He was an older man, showing signs of aging, and his hair was fairly ruffled. Still, he smiled at my boss, who just grunted. The man then looked at me, and I looked down at my sandwich. Surprisingly quickly, the man made it across the diner and slid into my booth. All of the other booths were empty. He placed a book in front of him. Hello, the man said cheerfully, reaching his hand across the table. I froze and glanced up. He retracted his hand after a few seconds. Beautiful day, isn't it? He asked me. I shrugged. I hadn't noticed. I didn't particularly feel like being cheerful as well. Yes, absolutely gorgeous out. My daughter just turned 13, and she left with her mom to go to the beach. The girls left me all alone. I figured I'd go out for a bite to eat. He grinned. I took another bite of my sandwich. My boss came to the table. Do you two know each other? He asked, eyeing me. Oh no, just passing through, really. I'll have what he's having, though, the man said. My boss blinked. We don't serve tuna here, he said. Oh, no tuna? Ah, that's quite a shame. You should really consider adding tuna to the menu. All right, then. What kind of soup do you have? The man clasped his hands together. Tomato and chicken noodle. Fantastic, I'll have a bowl of the tomato, please, he said enthusiastically. My boss just grunted and walked towards the kitchen. Now then, how are you? He asked, turning his attention to me again. I was still leaned over my sandwich. Fine, I said. Just fine? No, really. How are you? He asked me, sitting up straight. I coughed. What's this about? You trying to sell me something? I asked. I really don't care for whatever you've got. I'm tired and not much in the mood for a salesperson. As soon as I had finished speaking, I knew I was pretty rude. But I shrugged it off. It was true. Oh no, not trying to sell you anything. I don't have anything I can sell. Well, that's not technically true. I was at a signing last week and I do have a few dozen books in my car, but I'm not trying to sell those to you. Besides, it's the 4th book in the series. You'd get all confused. Although I have been told that the book does work well on its own, he said, occasionally fixing his gaze off into the distance for a few seconds at a time. I just stared. My boss brought out the bowl of soup and placed it in front of the man. Thank you, the man smiled. My boss again grunted and returned to his perch behind the counter. The man opened a packet of crackers and threw them into the soup. This has always been something I do with the soup. I don't know why, he said, chuckling. I just eyed him and watched in silence. You write books, then? I asked him. Oh, yes, I do. Happy to call my job. Wouldn't stop for the world. He seemed to be enjoying the obviously fresh out of the microwave soup. Do you sell well? I questioned, mostly just asking whatever came to mind. He paused and wiped his lips with a napkin. Well, I'm not Stephen King. Do all right, I suppose. Someone reads it, which is nice. And that's one of your books, then? I gestured to the book he had pushed off to the side. He nodded, putting his spoon down. Yes, sir, this is number 1. My very first novel. He picked it up and looked at the cover, as if he hadn't seen it before. I was pretty miserable when I finished this book, he said. I coughed to cover my chuckle. God bless you, he said. Man, those were some rough days. I was just 20 years old. I had just moved out of my dad's house. I didn't get the job I thought I had. I was pretty depressed. Didn't have any money or a girlfriend. I was sleeping all kinds of weird hours. He kept staring at the cover of his book. But you know what one of the best things for me was? He asked, looking at me in the eye. He got silent. It wasn't rhetorical. What? I asked. When I knew that there were people that loved me, truly cared for me, even people that I didn't know genuinely were interested in my well-being. He was suddenly back to eating more soup. I had long since finished my sandwich. I sat there with an eyebrow raised. The spoon once again rested on the edge of the bowl. When I came in here, I saw the same look in your eyes that I saw in the mirror when I was 20 years old. And I just felt compelled to tell you that I love you. And no, I don't mean that in some weird, stranger, romantic way. How'd I break that to my wife? But I genuinely care about you. You need to know that even when it doesn't feel like it, there are people that care about you. The man reached into his pocket and pulled out a cell phone. Oh man, looks like I've got to go. My best friend and his wife are having their second child. I've got to get to the hospital. Oh, here. He reached inside his jacket and pulled out a card. You ever feel like you don't have anywhere to go, or you need a meal or a ride or someone to talk to? Call that number. I took it silently. Pleasure to meet you, the man said, pulling his wallet out of yet another pocket in his jacket. He went to the counter, paid my boss, and quickly hurried out the door, the bell ringing as the door swung open. I watched him hop in his old 2010 sedan and drive off. Next to his empty bowl of soup, his book sat on the table, staring at me, speaking without talking. That story was called Diner Man. I wrote this on July the 21st of 2016. I think I even can find the time. Oh yeah, I can. At 8:58 in the morning, apparently. 2016 was a year. It was, if I had to say, it was probably the worst year of my life. I was 20 years old. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. You might see where I'm going with this. And yeah, it was a really tough year. And a couple months after I moved out of my dad's place, maybe like 2 months, I wrote this story. And its odd character, the man in the diner, is me in the future. Me, married with a daughter, have published 4 novels and whatnot. Went to a book signing. Driving a car. Yeah. This book is in my first collection of short stories, Fantastical. And yeah, it's pleasant. It definitely needs a little bit of polish. That's 24-year-old me saying that, not 20-year-old me. I had a lot of trouble when I first started trying to write professionally, not using I said or he said all the time, and finding different ways to convey dialogue. So there's a lot of I said, he said, just I did this a lot. I'm trying to work on that and whenever I write. But yeah, I really like it. And it was a lesson I had to learn that these people out there, people that I came across, were people that loved me and people that cared for me. And there are still people out there, even when it doesn't feel like it. That was a lesson I was learning in 2016. Yeah, and this story is one of the ways I worked through learning that. And I was just looking at the prompt. The prompt for this one, back when I wrote it, was you are a waiter or waitress at a diner. You take your break, and a person walks in and sits down at your table and tells you their life story. Pretty basic, straight to the point. And that's exactly what I wrote. Me in the future, I like to imagine he wears a trench coat. Yeah. Someone left a comment on this. I was just reading through the comments for the first time in years, and it said, "Thanks for this. It's the nicest thing I've read today. I'm reminded that someone does care. I'm in a low point in my life right now, and your story makes it hard to hold back the tears as I work." I mentioned this in the last episode where I read The Man from 200. The comments like that really make my day. Like, people appreciating my work. I don't know. It's really sweet. It's a sweet thing for someone to say. And like I mentioned also in the last episode, reading back the story, it's not a great story, in my personal opinion. Like I said, it could use some polishing. But yeah, just hearing that people liked it, it's really nice. I also like how future me is a kind of eccentric and doesn't really care about embarrassing himself. I'm assuming that's a dad thing when I'm a dad. Also, shout out to my best friend who has 2 kids while I only have 1. That's Diner Man. The Grim Rapper. Well, you had your chance. Yeah, we told you well, but now I'm here to drag you to hell. You messed up, screwed up, made a mistake, and now on your birthday you're not getting a cake. You've been warned and you've been told, but from now on you'll never be cold. You'll be screaming in pain, can't fall to your knees, 'cause you'll be down there for eternity. Word! Jim coughed bitterly. Stick to reaping, not rapping. The Grim Reaper shrugged. It got boring doing the same job over and over again. He contemplated his next soul as he dragged this one down into the fire. That was something else, wasn't it? That was called The Grim Rapper. The prompt for this one is simple. It's not the Grim Reaper, it's the Grim Rapper. And yeah, this is a silly one. No comments on it or anything like that, but around this time, let me see when I wrote this. Oh no, not anywhere near this time, but I wrote another rap, a diss track against one of my friends for his birthday, and it was a lot of fun. And yeah, I'm not a rapper. I'm not a rapper, but I like doing that. It's just something silly. I like stepping out of my comfort zone, my genre, what I normally write, and occasionally just write something out of left field. And this one, The Grim Rapper, is like that. It also making light of eternal damnation. So yeah, it's way out of left field, but I think it's pretty funny. If the Grim Reaper got bored and wanted to write a diss track against someone that he was escorting into the farm.
Dear Billy, thank you so much for writing us here at the North Pole. It was such a delight reading your letter, and I'll make sure to bake a batch of cookies for you this coming Christmas. Sometimes people in our life go away. One day they're here for us, and the next they're gone. Some of them go live in a wonderful place for a long time. Santa went away a little bit ago. Santa was here for a long time, and he used to tell me how much he looked forward to going to that wonderful place. He went there, and he won't be coming back. Santa is gone, Billy. No one else knows, but I will tell a few more of our friends like you. Don't worry about us at the North Pole. We'll find someone to deliver gifts for a long time to come, and we'll always remember Santa. Billy, it would be my honor to keep writing to you. It's okay to be sad because Santa was one of our greatest gifts of all, but remember to be happy that he was here. Send a letter to the North Pole, and you can be sure I'll read it. With love, Mrs. Claus.
All right. Thanks, An, for reading that. That short story is called Mrs. Claus. It was based on a writing prompt I got where this kid writes to Santa at like June just to check in how he's doing, see if he's been good enough. And his wife responds and says that Santa passed away since last Christmas. And I thought that was really an interesting thing. What would Mrs. Claus write to just some random kid?
Actually, yeah, I've never thought about it that way. I never would have had the thought that Mrs. Claus would ever have to write about that to a kid, right? So that was very interesting to read. Mm-hmm.
It's just a short little thing, a short little letter. I like to imagine like only a few kids got to learn about that.
Right.
And someday Santa will be replaced and someone else will be sending out gifts.
Other kids. Oh, sorry. Go for
after
it.
you.
I was gonna say, but other kids wouldn't know that there would be another Santa. It would just always be Santa to them.
Yeah, absolutely. The legend of Santa keeps going on. I also hinted at that Santa believed in going to heaven and whatnot, and that's where Mrs. Claus says he went. But she's telling this to some young kid, like an 8-year-old, so she's being very gentle.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, she said it. She did it in a very graceful way. Mm-hmm. Very soothing.
Didn't say he died, just that he went away.
Yeah, to a place for a long time.
Mm-hmm. This is one of my favorite stories to reread in the summertime, Christmas in June.
Yeah. I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it. I was as I was reading it, it was oh my gosh, where can this be going?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, just a short little thing. Sometimes it only takes a few paragraphs to get across the message. I also like to leave stories really open-ended, you imagine where the story continues and whatnot. You imagine how the North Pole gets along without Santa.
You know what would be really cool? If in the future, Billy becomes the next Santa.
That would be interesting, yeah. That's the thing with my stories is I like to let the reader imagine how it continues. So putting Billy as the next Santa would be an amazing way to continue the story in your own mind.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks very much for reading and discussing with me. Do you want to drop an Instagram or anything?
Sure. You can. My Instagram is at 32on, THREE, the number 2, and then ANH. That's about it.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much.
No problem.
So yeah, thanks for listening to this episode of the podcast. This has been brought to you by your host, Peter Vaughn. You can find me on Instagram at TDWFan or on Twitter at TDWFan or TDWrites. Thanks so much again to An for reading Mrs. Claus for us. You can again find her on Instagram at 32on, 3 the word, 2 the number, and on. Yeah. Again, thank you so much for listening. I hope to be putting out a few more episodes in this season of the podcast, and maybe we'll see where it goes from there. Yeah, thank you so much again for listening, and we'll see you next time. Bye. This is TDW.
Some of them go live in a wonderful place for live.
Yeah.
Because in this day and age, we go live.
Yeah.